Alrighty, hello every folks, and welcome to yet another one of these tier list type dealies. One that's been asked for a few times, and one that I should have done sooner, as always. You know, again, a bit too late, I don't know, a decade too late to this particular craze. Anywho, Tactics Ogre PSP Remake tier list here for all the different skills. Now, bear in mind, I boiled down some of these categories because a lot of them do repeat in different ways and just have like different elemental flavors to them. And still, despite probably missing a few, because there's certain skills that'll only appear in certain circumstances, and the wikis no help, and the official guides no help, so there might be some very, very, very oddly specific ones missing, like, for example, I don't know, the Buccaneers' unique variants of certain things. Basically, if you didn't know, the Fairy and Gremlin stuff will kind of, like, alternate in terms of what does what for what class. Except in their case, I believe it's a mix of different versions. So, hell, you know, there's all kinds of different stuff like that out there. But I'm going to try to cover the majority of them. Even boiled down, this is still a list of 184 different things. So, you know, we're going to be here for a bit of a hot minute. I'll try to go through this as quickly as possible and try to explain everything as best as possible. And this is coming from a kind of challenge runner's perspective. Basically, for over a decade now, I've been challenge running this thing under all kinds of stupid rule sets. So that's kind of the way I see it here. If you're looking for the vanilla kind of experience tier list here, I mean, it's usually going to boil down to give everybody anatomy and then who cares for the rest. But in terms of the actual more advanced stuff, that's what we're here for. Now, to explain the different tiers, Superior just basically means they're like head and shoulders above everything else. They are oppressive at what they do. Universal is going to be, well, as it says, universal kind of application all over the place. You can put it on almost any unit. Just kind of overall solid skill no matter what. Decent means it does its job, but it's not necessarily going to be outshining some of the higher stuff. Niche is for very oddly specific stuff that is still effective. Utility is for just oddly specific uses that don't have a whole lot of use cases. Multiplayer only is actually, there's actually one that I already know is already on the list, but for example, stuff like Condemn, where it's something that literally would only work in a multiplayer troll team, more or less. Useless is if anything on here is actually legitimately useless. And then Meme is just where some of the skills are just kind of there for a bit of a laugh. For example, anything with Spendthrift. If you didn't know, yes, that is actually a debuff in the game that causes you to lose money as well as health. There's like 2 units in the game that ever get it, so there's absolutely no point in that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get going here. So, these are going to be labeled down kind of how the game has them in order. Initially, I thought if I go to my more or less 100%ed save file, I'd be able to find all the skills on there. Turns out not even then could that actually happen. Basically, if you go to the class menu, you can like look down all the skills you've unlocked. Nope. Alright, so first things first, Air Magic. Basically, I'm going to put this under Superior here. Well, what? Okay, I guess I'll just have to type it out then. Fine. So, reason being, Balmy Breeze is insanely good with solid long range. You basically have solid damage like most of the spell groups have there. You've got a slowdown move, you've got a... Alright, so we are starting with the interruptions already. Get to have an edit a few seconds into this already, going to be a really long video. Alright, so yeah, Air Magic goes under Superior. Basically, you got stuff like Black Willow for mass immobilization. You've got Mass Sleep off of there with some pretty solid range. I personally view it as one of the better ones, so that's going up there. Next, we got Earth. That's going under Universal. Area Petrification is great, and the slowdown is awesome, but it's just kind of generally universal. I would say it's not super oppressive because you've got some lower hit rates on Petrification. Like with Air Magic, if you've got Spell Strike and you've got Balmy Breeze, you're probably hitting that. So that's nice. Water I'm going to put under Niche. Basically, it's a lot of weird utility stuff. Like, for example, AoE heal plus a chance of poison heal is... I personally find that hilarious. I love running water on units, but it is kind of niche, all things considered. There's not really a whole lot of reason to pick it above other things. Fire... Ooh, whoops. Nice spell in there, Genius. Fire Magic's going under Superior. Later on, when you've got Brimstone, basically Envenom plus TP removal is really solid. Again, usual suite of damaging stuff. I'm not even really counting that. You've got weakening, strengthening, all that kind of thing. It's just very solid overall. Basically, air, fire, and divine are going to be your main ones there. But I'm putting divine under universal. Basically because it's much more utilitarian than the other ones. Like air and fire, like if you use those right, they can be very oppressive. Divine is more of a support type thing, which like it doesn't really get anything super oppressive. It does get a lot of unique stuff like exorcism and all that, as well as boon of swiftness and all that. But again, universal use, not necessarily oppressive use on that one. Ice magic, I'm gonna put under. I guess we'll just put it under niche. It's definitely the worst of the different magic types there. Its abilities are very oddly specific. Battering Ram is cool, but aside from that, like they're just debuffs that you can get a lot of easier ways, so you're probably not going to be going for it. Dark is definitely going under here as well, mostly because it's got a lot of the debuffs that everything else has. It's like the divine equivalent of like debuffs, more or less. It has a little bit of everything. Like it's got the charm, it's got the petrification, it's got the paralysis, all that kind of stuff. It's just not necessarily as strong. Like paralytic wave is about as good as it gets realistically as far as like overall utility. Charm is good. It's got the envenom that fire has. It's got the charm in there, like I said. It's got sleep, all the other stuff. It's usually lower hit rate and lower AoE. Not to mention, some of them do end up costing more, so I generally feel like it's more on the universal pile than actually fully superior there. Draconic depends on how it's used. So I'm going to put Draconic under decent. I know I missed lightning. I'm going back to lightning. Yeah, lightning. I'm just going to put there. Lightning magic, basically, yeah, it's got the stun and all that. It's got a accuracy boost in there, unless I'm mixing it up with Wind Vision again. It's decent. It's just not amazing. You know, nothing too mind-blowing there. I'm sure nothing too earth-shattering just got revealed there. Necromancy is going under utility. Basically, re-raising undead units and all that kind of thing. It doesn't come up that often. Plus, you have to use reagents for it. Plus, you know, healing undead. You gotta spend resources to heal them. You've got a charm move in there, but again, you gotta spend resources to do it. Basically, it's a bewitch, so solid. But dark can do it better. Overall, its utility, I would honestly say that one's probably better. Better off just used from the scrolls. Like, it's more or less the same cost to use the reagents as it is the scrolls anyway, and there's less overall stuff to worry about. You know immediately how much stuff you have to use, instead of worrying about stockpiling random piles of hearts and crap. Alright, War Dances, I'm going to put under decent. So the later debuff ones, like your Mass Charm and things like that, are pretty strong, actually, as well as Mass Strengthen, Mass Fortify, all that are pretty good. If you're making an AI team, like if we're talking a multiplayer scenario, even putting Harvest Dance on somebody is just a way to make that unit useless, because it will repeatedly look at like the combined healing of everything in there, even though it's barely healing everybody for anything. The animation is super annoying, and I kind of wish that I'd put some kind of thing in here. You know what, let's just color it red. For it's decent, but it sucks. Actually, I don't think... Can I recolor this from here? Possibly. Okay, maybe not. Well, I would if I could. So, yeah, it's annoying to use, but overall, it's a decent support type deal. Ninjutsu goes under niche. So, it has very strong abilities, but there's better ways to accomplish those same things. They've got a lot of really high damage moves that you may have potentially seen coming out of the AI every now and then, because they came in with intelligence boosting gear and spellcraft and stuff like that. Actually, I don't think they can even get spellcraft. They just came up with good boosting gear. So actually getting damage out of that is pretty inconsistent. The buff moves are pretty good, but again, just like the other ones, you might as well just use scrolls for that. If you put them on AI teams, they rarely use them. Decoy is awesome, but again, just use the scroll for that. There's no point in putting an actual, skill thing on there. So it's fine. It's got good utility. I mean, being able to ignore height, awesome. You already have a card that can do that same thing. So we'll just go ahead and put that over there. Songs, it's just like war dances, basically. It's just different war dances, a different flavor of the same thing. Alright, now we get on to the weapon types. Okay. Fists we're going to put under decent. Basically, they're short range is their problem, but they're decently high damage. They scale really well. Later on, they've got some kind of good, just kind of overall usage. The fact that they're somehow heavy, despite being fist weapons, and despite the fact that they're, a two-handed thing, well, I don't know. You'd really expect more out of them, or maybe some more ranged options, or something, especially considering that the people who made this have a whole thing for making melee units with long-range attacks, but for some reason fists get the short end of the stick. At least they're better than they were in OB64, but they're still, they're decent. Again, they're a decent damage weapon. You can't really say that they don't hold up to other stuff. They're about the equivalent of, great swords and that kind of thing. They're better than 2 HKs, that's for sure. But I wouldn't say they're ultra amazing. Alright, next up, we got daggers. I would put them under universal. Now, they are one of the kind of top scaling weapons, so to speak. So you got daggers, bows, and 1 HKs that are kind of that top tier scaling kind of thing. Now, the reason the daggers stay in universal is because I'm rating this not just for the main story, but throughout the entire games. Like, when I like to do challenge runs, at this point, at one point I used to do just the main story. At this point, I like to do main story all the way through all 4 coded chapters as well, which means that daggers fall off past chapter 4. They're pretty strong. Early on, they scale exceptionally well. You'll see in the level 1 run that's coming up. Early on, daggers, one guy hits 60 in the first fight, while bows are doing 20. So they're very strong, they scale really well, but their actual maximum is pretty low. And especially when it comes to their finishers, they do cap out pretty low. At least in vanilla. In One Vision, they actually get way stronger, but in vanilla, they do actually have a pretty low cap, which it may take a while to get there, which actually 1H swords actually have the same problem. But again, they're pretty universal, they're pretty reliable. I put daggers a bit above 1H swords in this case, mostly because of coincidence, but also because they kind of do the same thing. 1H swords get better finisher options, daggers get more range and are generally lighter, so that's pretty nice there. 2H swords go under niche. They've got some good skill bonuses on there. They've got some good synergy with 100% moves with some of their mid-game swords, but generally it's you maybe want to rock 1 or 2 units with those. They have the damage. They have decent scaling. It's just that there's better options overall. They've got some niche stuff in their unique weapons, but usually you don't want to run a full team of two-handers. Actually, as a joke, a little while ago, I made an entire multiplayer team using only two-handed swords of different versions, using 2Hs and 2HKs, and they were not amazing. That about sums that up. Alright, next up we got axes. They're decent. Good finishers, good overall damage. They've got 1 and 2-handed variants, which is pretty nice. So yeah, they're solid overall. Hammers kind of do the same thing, but better. So we'll go ahead and put that over there. Yeah, solid, good damage. Again, hammers are just like axes. They just pretty much do everything better. They've got some different options. There's some spell-casting axes, oddly enough, that are better for hybrid builds. Hammers are definitely more for physical, wacky builds, but, overall, again, very, very similar. Just hammers have the attack bonus over them, for sure. For anyone unfamiliar, by the way, since it feels like this comes up more often than you may see, attack bonus just means penetration. I'm not talking about, they stacked up this attack bonus and this other attack bonus. Like, attack bonus is a combination of your weapon's attack value plus your skill in that thing, essentially plus any augments if applicable versus enemy armor, and any skills that reduce your skills. So more or less each of these things are just boosting that attack value. Scaling is is a whole bonus formula thing on the very end of that. So overall, higher attack means generally more viability in more situations. Anyway, moving on. So spears. Okay, bear with me on this one. I freaking love spears. All right. I immediately I tried to mentally. I was mixing up spears and superior. I was gonna put spear superior, which kind of sounds like a Pokemon at some point. Give it some time. It'll probably be like a Barracuda with a friggin' knife or something. But the reason I say that, they are one of 2 weapon classes to have a triple hit move that is pretty much guaranteed to insta-kill almost anything. The extra range means that you can get free attacks off in a lot of situations. They're not really much heavier than almost anything else on here. Like, they're slightly above, they're about the same level as fist weapons for some reason. Again, spears are pretty freaking heavy in real life, so I don't know how they're coming to that conclusion. And then later on, when you get your 3-tile versions, you can always just pop down a Barricade and stab behind that. But yeah, good weapons overall. They've got good additional options as well. Like, a lot of times for the mid-game, I like to use the Scorpion +1, because, you know, basically poison on poke, all that kind of thing. Not a whole lot of classes get to use them, though, which is a bit unfortunate, but either way, good overall weapon for the classes that get it. And let's go ahead and move on here to the next one that has to be on here. I'm going to skip down the list a little bit, but the other weapon type that gets the triple hit insta-kill is the crossbow. Basically, one-handed crossbows are, as far as I'm concerned, the most busted weapon in the game. The Damask +1 is, hands down, I've tested against every other weapon type, if we're not counting cursed weapons that are completely maxed out, which that's kind of its own can of worms. The Damask +1 crossbow is, like, there's nothing better. Pound for pound, it is the best weapon in the game. In the vanilla game, anyway. So, the way that it works, early on, they're busted because they've got their big AoE move that scales with both Augment Fire as well as TP. So you can do TP plus Augment Fire, and you can get insano damage off that. Their Bind move is kind of niche, but it's whatever. The triple hit you get after that, though, Death Wail is, again, pretty much a one-shot kill on almost anything. If it wasn't for that, the level 1 run probably would have relied a hell of a lot more on spears. And additionally, the final move, like a stop move, doesn't seem like it would be that useful, but there are those situations where you can't quite kill with the Death Wail, and you don't quite want to bind something, and you just need a unit out of the way, and that's what the Flashbang is useful for. So, there you go. That's really handy there. What else do we got? 1 HKs. So, 1-hit katanas are good, but pretty much nobody gets to use them. There's only 2 classes that get to use them. They scale exceptionally well, but unfortunately, most of their damage does come from scaling. So while I am putting them under superior, please bear in mind that it's one of those kind of weapon classes that goes from doing absolute trash damage to suddenly one-shotting stuff. So big on the maximum, kind of low on the minimum. I feel like all weapons kind of could use like a bit of a graph, like, you know, the whole like Monster Hunter weapon effectiveness graph. I feel like each of them kind of needs something like that. But anyway, next up we got 2 HKs, which go down here under utility, because I'll be honest, they are, like, unless you're running a Swordmaster and it's their only weapon type, there's no reason you'd use this aside from use abilities on some of those swords, and that's about it. They've potentially got the highest single hit damage in the game. Potentially. But, like, aside from using it on Lord, and maybe you can make that work, but there's better options, they just suck as a weapon class. They're not light. They don't really get too many defensive bonuses on them. It's the Makwahatl that gets a bunch of uses of Petrify, which is great. Works really great on Swordmasters, and if you make a multiplayer team abusing that, sure, you can get some decent results, but overall, I mean, you gotta rely on a semi-unique, kind of rare weapon. It's just not very great. So yeah, utility, the spells you could use off them are better than the weapons themselves. Was it the Ogre Blade, or not the Ogre Blade, Ogre's Bane is the top end one. Again, potentially high single hit damage in the game with their attack bonus skill, but it's just so completely not worth it. It's not even funny. It's just, they're just bad. All right, next is Cudgels, which are going under niche. This is a really weird one because I love Cudgels for challenge runs. They rank up very quickly compared to a lot of other things. But the individual weapon damage is trash. You can get that weapon damage up pretty decently, but really it's more for oddly specific circumstances that you use these. So, for example, if you're getting an anatomy bonus off a Damask Cudgel and stuff like that, that could potentially be useful. Basically, abusing a stun effect on hit plus anatomy is pretty interesting. The double hit move they get does do a pretty decent amount of damage, and they do get scaling moves that have a high maximum but terrible penetration. So very, very oddly specific weapons. The one-handed elemental wands and stuff like that you get later can actually be very viable endgame weapons. Think, if you've played Dark Souls before, think of like the Demon Fire Sage staff and stuff like that. That's more or less how Cudgels work, where they just do nothing until you get the elemental version, and then suddenly that thing is like eviscerating stuff immediately. So it's an odd one. Again, personal favorite of mine, but it's just gonna go over there. Next up we got bows. A little bit overhyped in terms of how good they are. So bows are a very universal thing. A lot of classes get to use them, just like crossbows, meaning that they're fairly easy to rank up passively. You can go for a kind of defensive skirmisher build with shield and bow. You can go for like a stunning build. You can actually do a fun thing later on in the game, going for like a stun plus a silence or whatever else. Abusing tremendous shot and ninjutsu scrolls and things. So you can get some interesting stuff going with bows. Again, either lightweight or heavy, depending on how you need them. You can have insane range off them. You can have good defense and just general passive usefulness off them. Yeah, don't underestimate how good shortbows can be. Sure, they don't immediately overpower stuff as well as some of the longbows do, but those eventually have a problem with dealing with kind of post-Chapter 4 enemies anyway. Yeah, solid finishers, low maximum damage, but good universal application, I would say. Blowguns are a very odd story. We're just going to go with niche, but bear with me. So blowguns, okay. The higher end versions are some of the best damage in the game, bizarrely enough. The lower end versions have some of the best debuff options that you can get. In fact, recently I've been redubbing the entirety of the no skill run to boil that down into under an hour out of the original 44 hours that run was, in order to just show off how good stuff like an entire party with charm darts can be. They're very good for playing around with. Actually, screw it, we're going to put them in the meme category, actually. Because they're very good, but very oddly specific. In fact, the entire run didn't even use the skill, technically, so we're just going to put them all the way over there. They're very hard to quantify, because they're all over the list. So, really, really high potential max damage, but usually you're only going to be seeing like 1 to 10 and then a debuff. So we're going to put them in the meme category because they're usually just for shooting debuffs out of a little dart, and they're just kind of an extra you put on different units. If you put them in the primary hand, they've got a lot of interesting bonuses, so that's cool too. Like the Petra Dart has plus 15 strength, which makes a rogue very tanky. Alright, next up we got Fusels. We're going to put that under decent. Actually, we're going to put that under universal. I mean, it's a gun, what do you want? Good solid damage double hit move. The other ones are kind of hit or miss. Very slow to use, but you know, for the few units that get access to them, they're a nice universal application ability. Before you say, wait a minute, bows are better than Fusels, they gotta be somewhere else. Consistently, Fusiliers beat archers in multiplayer no matter what you do. They are just better overall. I wasn't expecting that either, but I've regularly been putting different multiplayer teams against each other, and yeah, Fusels do hard counter archers. It's kind of funny. Next is Throne, which is going to go under Decent. Wow, nice spell in there. So, reason they're going under Decent. They're decent. I know, shocker. So, decent because they've got high damage, not amazingly high maximum damage, but high consistent damage. Can use them one-handed. It sucks that you have to use ammo to use them, but overall they are fairly decent. If you're only running 1 or 2 units, they're not insanely expensive to use, especially considering the potential cost of some of the crafted weapons you get. If you are regularly recruiting and selling off monster units too, it's actually an interesting little tidbit that those monster units will actually give you the materials that you need for similar tier crafted upgrades to your throne weapons. That's why a lot of Beastmasters use them. It's one of those little details that I absolutely love, so we're just going to put that over there. Alright, Anatomy. A skill that improves your performance against pretty much every unit in the game. What a shocker. So, like a lot of racial abilities, basically Anatomy is, well, it's people bonus damage, but when you use a racial skill, if you use your own racial skill, you get a defensive bonus against everything. Just like, for example, if you got shot with a crossbow and you had crossbows, you would rank down the enemy crossbows. If an enemy unit has Anatomy, you rank down their Anatomy, but if you have Anatomy, the other guy doesn't have Anatomy, it's just checking for, is one of these characters a person? So if you're attacking a person, Anatomy would give you an attack bonus. If you are a person and you're getting hit and you have Anatomy, then you get a defensive bonus. And again, if the enemy has Anatomy, it ranks down theirs by that corresponding amount. Meaning that it is probably the single most universally applicable skill in the entire game. However, it's so dang good it goes into Superior. Actually, for a while there, I kept being told to not even use it on challenge runs because it is practically broken, which is true. Now, we're going to put all the other ones into niche. Pretty much all the other ones are just, they're nice if you're going against that particular thing. All racial skills go up phenomenally slow, and you do not fight enough of anything other than people to reasonably have a rank of like higher than 2. More than likely, you'll get Draconology. So I'm going to put Draconology as decent. But all the other ones are over here. Because Yunin comes with Draconology. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone else that comes with any other racial skills that aren't Anatomy. I want to say maybe What's-His-Face from Palace of the Dead might have Golem, but who gives a crap, honestly. Golem isn't even good against golems, so whatever. In fact, let's just put Golem over here. Because realistically, if you can hit a Golem, you don't need Golem to hit it. And if you can't hit a Golem, Golem probably will not be enough for you to get past their defense. Their defense is kind of weird, so we're just going to put that over there. All the other ones are just kind of, if you happen to be fighting that thing, great. If you're trying to recruit that thing, then there you go. You put that skill on there, you improve your recruit odds by like 10%, give or take, depending on the situation. Alright, next we got Augment. So Augment element goes over there. Yeah, it's exactly what it says. You're just doubling up on your attack bonuses. So you put Augment. You get augmented. Shocker! Alright, next, parry. Okay, so parry goes here. Where does deflect go, though? Because, so it's going to seem kind of odd. I personally view parry a good bit higher than deflect, so we're going to put deflect under decent. So, even though deflect, hard counter is one of the most consistent damage sources in the kind of mid to late game, so archers, deflect is one of those things where you can potentially just put bows on everybody, because there's like, you get crossbows, sure. Deflect only works on crossbows, bows, and blow darts. I guess thrown weapons too, actually. But okay, thrown weapons are fine. but you can usually kind of judge their range. Bows have the longest range, crossbows have slightly higher damage, but the AI usually is pretty good at aiming those wrong, and blow darts, I mean, deflect isn't really going to do it for you. So, and by the way, yeah, for guns, deflect will not do a thing. That's kind of one of their little perks there. So, if you're kind of doing a challenge run type scenario, and you're in the end game, and like let's say while doing the solo, right? Having parry on there helped deal with a lot of enemies that were up close, for obvious reasons, because up close enemies are more likely to do those basic attacks. While there are ranged enemies that will do deflect more often, it's really their actual finishers that are the real threat, not their normal shots. If you set up everybody's defenses right. Meaning that parry will, generally speaking, be more useful because it's able to shut down melee finishers before they happen, whereas with range damage, it can be... deflect isn't really going to do anything against their finishers and things. So instead, you would do something like, let's say you're getting targeted by bows or crossbows, and you would just put bows or crossbows on the units that are getting targeted, which most classes can use, and therefore can just reduce the ranks and incoming damage from those things pretty significantly. Meaning that deflect is a bit more niche, because, yeah, with parry, I mean, you got a whole lot of different versions of different melee weapons coming in, so a universal kind of catch-all skill like parry is generally going to be a bit better than deflect, in my opinion. Next, since I apparently never picked it up on everybody, is Overpower. So that goes over here. It's nice, and it's actually kind of a cool thing that if you have an archer with Overpower and they shoot somebody that rolls deflect, it actually has a different animation. It's very rare that you'll see that because it's two very unlikely rolls at the same time. But yeah, it's very, very niche is the thing. It potentially has some multiplayer meta potential, but it's one of those things that you rarely want to dedicate a skill slot to because it's essentially a saving roll when you could essentially have a different, more useful thing in that slot instead. Alright, next is Resist Debuff, which is going to go for multiplayer only. There's practically no reason to use resists in the single-player game. In multiplayer, if you ever thought that the resists are completely useless, they're not. So like in multiplayer, you can put proof skills on basically every piece of equipment that you have. You can equip a proof skill in your one proof slot, but you can essentially use a resist to get yet another thing potentially mostly resisted to almost entirely get rid of all debuffs. Now you might say, wait a minute, just get the Fire Crest and put Death Proof on there. A, you only get one, and B, it actually does not stop all debuffs. I know, I thought so too. It only stops major debuffs. So all the minor ones still hit just fine. And if you get a unit that, is immune to all of these crazy godly things and can still get stunned, they're just as stoppable as anything else. So, we'll go ahead and put that there. Next up, we'll do... what do we got here? So Attenuate, I'm also putting MP only. So Attenuate, it basically scales down incremental amounts of a certain element. Basically what this results in is if you know that there's a multiplayer team that's going to be running the Jiggler set, you put Attenuate Dark and they don't do damage anymore. Realistically, there's some niche cases and challenge runs for you to use this, but most of the time, if you're in that scenario already that you'd need to use Attenuate, you've got other problems and other ways to potentially deal with that situation first, but it's a nice little thing in the tool belt, I suppose. Alright, next we've got Rampart Aura going under Universal. I mean, it stops units from moving. What do you want? It's whatever. Counterattack is going under Decent. It's decent for training, but overall, damage-wise, you're not going to be counterattacking as often as you may think. Again, it's usually going to be finishers and debuffs that are going to be the big kind of changers as time goes on. Unless you're overpowered, counterattack is not going to matter as much. Knockback is, I would say, decent, or universal. if you've got a ranged attacker, a lot of times knockback is just useful for either forcing a unit to take an extra tile of movement or knocking them off a cliff. It's just something that's always handy on ranged units, kind of iffy on melee units, but potentially busted in the hands of Swordmaster with Preempt. So we're just going to put that under Universal. Any unit that you could expect to make a use of knockback should pretty much never take it off. Strengthen, we'll put here. I feel it also gets a little bit overplayed. Strengthen is just, if you're already winning the fight, it makes you win more, is the best way to put it. It improves your maximum attack. It doesn't actually improve your minimum attack. Sometimes it gets misunderstood because early on the scaling seems a little bit funkier. Like, you know, the other guy has 5 armor, you've got 10 attack. These are not actual numbers that are possible, but just roll with it. Then it scales it up by like 15, 30, 45, that kind of thing, percent, which is strong on its own, but if you're not getting past armor, it does nothing. So, you know, it's kind of whatever. Same thing for Fortify. You just kind of decide what roles people need to play, and they probably will not need to take those off. Spellcraft is same thing, except Spellcraft actually boosts attack value, not maximum attack. However, Spell Strike is going under Superior. So, since apparently I can't spell today, good job. Spell Strike plus debuffs plus anything with long range is ridiculous. Like, you know, Brimstone or Balmy Breeze plus Spell Strike is pretty much shutting down a lot of potential things coming your way. Like, you expected a lot of finishers to come in, you throw out Brimstone, those finishers don't exist anymore. Plus they now have to deal with Envenom, which not many units can deal with, which might result in a healer wasting several turns. Or maybe even a knight pulling back to go heal this damaged backliner. So, very, very good utility in a lot of situations. Easily the best debuff, or the best passive in my opinion. Resistance is niche. It scales down incoming magic damage. Pretty useful in One Vision, not so useful in Vanilla, where you don't see too many ridiculously powerful mages. For the most part, there's like 2 or 3. Old Lady guarding Marika Castle definitely sticks out in my mind, but again, very niche, and you'd have to kind of put that on everybody, because otherwise all you're doing is redirecting the damage somewhere else, not necessarily doing anything about it. True Strike is going to go here. True Flight is going to be under Niche, because in a lot of cases your archers are going to be running Tremendous Shot and other things anyway. So for units that need it, it's there. You can sometimes swap it out for other things, because again, Dexterity doubles as an accuracy skill, so it's not necessarily as completely necessary as, for example, some of the strength users and all that. Let's see, Spell Strike. We already covered how good that is. Dodge is decent. Actually, no, it's... Actually, it's going to go up here. I would say Dodge is one of the more kind of superior ones, because Dodge plus Parry is a really good hard counter to a lot of melee enemies, especially a lot of kind of double strikers later on in the game. Just basically allowing to either dodge or parry a lot of things, potentially build up a lot of TP while denying it to the other side, especially in something like a solo. Alright, Sidestep, I'm going to put under Niche, because most of the time archers either completely can't hit or they are guaranteed to hit, and Sidestep, unless you've got a matching rank of their True Flight, is... I mean, these two are kind of dependent on each other, on how much they actually matter. Spell Ward, I'm going to put under Decent, because, I mean, you potentially can just shut down the debuffs that are the worst to you. Spell Ward may not be worth a slot to you. Constitution is definitely superior there. Just, I mean, potentially up to a maximum 40% health. That's really strong and potentially can save any kind of weird runs you got going on. So, I'm going to put the just the MP passives as one thing. So, basically what it comes down to is you've got Insight, which will increase your MP, which will increase your natural MP regeneration over time. You've got Expand Mind, which gives you a little bit of a bonus to your MP every turn that you get. And then Channeling, which I believe Channeling is the one that reduces the cost of your spells overall. A lot of them basically do the same thing. I'm just putting them all down as MP passives. They're decent. It's really situational. It's just down to what you need. You stack up all three if your MP demands are really that high. Most of the time you just pick one or two that sound good and you just roll with that. And otherwise you can just replace all of them with Meditate. So it's decent. I mean, they do the job. It's just kind of whatever, you know? Alright. Next up is Proof abilities. I mean, endgame, you probably want to be running at least one of these on everybody. Like, proper endgame, we're talking like Coda. You can usually get one proof on each of the shields, so whatever one you get off there, and then you usually will have enough points stacked up to finally afford that 10,000 cost to pick up one proof debuff on everybody as well. You just kind of have them on there, you know. It completely gets rid of a debuff, but there's not really much more to say on there. Swiftfoot. See, I've heard this labeled as a universal skill. I think it's just decent. In fact, I would say Jump is actually arguably better. See, Jump actually opens up different tiles for you to go to. Swiftfoot sounds nice because it makes you move farther, but you don't always want to be taking long moves. And in fact, in most cases, like, this is why I kind of like that it was made more or less a passive, just given for free to everybody in one vision. Because there's not really a point in using this particular one, in my opinion, unless you need a unit to go really, really far, and they're going really lightweight. In most cases, all you want to do is just, you know, take a short move with somebody to where they need to go. Having an extra 1 or 2 tiles of movement, depending on rank, is not really going to help you that much 90% of the time. It'll be there for that one oddly specific scenario where it gets you behind somebody's back, but most of the time you're using one of your precious few slots to theoretically deal with a situation that may never happen. Wade is kind of similar in that regard, but a bit like Jump, it at least opens up options. Like, it opens up flanking options, it opens up potential, like, sneaking through options. Jump is the best for that, because in most cases, 1 or 2 jump doesn't seem like much, but it does open up the map a lot. Wade is a bit more situational. Sanctuary is definitely niche. I'm going to put that over here. Like, it stops undead from stopping in that tile, which, again, would be nice. I've heard some people theorizing in previous, like, forum posts from years ago or whatever else that it would stop units from getting back up, and I think I even asked Rakes if he could actually implement that in. But yeah, not really. It doesn't do that. It just prevents them from stopping on that particular tile. If you stop next to them, it does nothing. It's very situational. It could be handy in Palace of the Dead, but again, very niche. Steadfast is... Okay, I'm going to put that under Superior, because it's easily one of the best skills in the game, and I never use it. It prevents you from getting knocked back, ever, which means that a lot of those endgame maps where you get sniped off cliffs, they don't happen anymore. So that's very nice there, but again, it's just very situational, but it's also incredibly good, because it's stopping this thing that is a massive threat, just completely, and it's a massive threat all the time, because anybody can do it. So that's to sit there.
Okie dokie, so let's go ahead and continue this thing on. Couple days later, but whatever, close enough. Yeah, sorry, interruptions happen. You get the deal by this point. Alright, so last one was Steadfast. Yeah, that Steadfast is so weird, because, like, again, it's one of the best skills in the game, yet for some reason, I almost never have it on any unit, just, you know, just because it is oddly specific, but it also is unique and, like, potentially can solve a lot of really, really bad situations right off the bat, especially on challenge runs. Like, I can't even tell you when doing the solo for One Vision, the difference that Steadfast makes, like, especially in that kind of situation, is absolutely insane. Like, it's the difference between a fight being an absolute cakewalk, like, let's say I think it was the Lightning Temple that had all the constant knockoffs, as opposed to just being a complete breeze and just completely rolling the entire map. So, either way, Steadfast definitely going over there. Now, this one's going to be kind of contentious, I'm sure, but double attack goes over here. Here's my reasoning on it. As I seem to say almost every other frickin' video, this is not FFT, meaning that you're actually giving something up by having a weapon in each hand. Now, like, in a lot of situations, something like, you know, melee weapon plus something like a crossbow or whatever else could be useful, because you've got the crossbow finisher, you've got a ranged option in your back pocket. You're giving up the shield kind of additional damage threshold, but you know, you're getting something far better in the form of having more options. Basically, doubling up on a melee attack, unless you've got really, really high scaling, you're basically doubling up your damage potentially, but also leaving yourself completely exposed for quite a while, because, again, you are still paying for 2 attacks. Again, goes back to the FFT thing. You're not just attacking twice as good, you're still paying twice the movement cost to be able to make that happen. So, you know, the little plus RT thing on your weapon, yeah, it means your next turn is going to be taking quite a while, meaning that, you know, fittingly, it is pretty much mostly useful on ninjas. But, you know, when it's combined with their other thing, their kind of infinite invincibility nonsense, then yeah, that kind of works for them. But I would say it definitely goes under the niche category. Like, even when it came back as a more available skill for one vision, it just wasn't really quite as insane as one might expect. Like, especially when it's like an early game thing for berserkers. Like, I've seen a couple comments saying that it was just way too broken to be available in the early game. But, like, no, you're giving up a lot of defense. Shields give you a lot more damage threshold than it seems. Like, yeah, even for vanilla stuff, it's like only 15 defense threshold. But still, that's like 3 weapon tiers. So, you know, just something to consider. Trajectory, that's going under utility. Very useful early on when you're first learning the game, but, you know, you kind of just picture that in your head as time goes on. It's actually an interesting thing that for consistency on the entire series, for all the Tactics Ogre games, they've more or less stayed pretty consistent on how bow trajectory actually works. Like, sure, initial SNES and PS1 locked is a little bit more restrictive, but generally speaking, when we're talking about firing arcs, they've kept pretty close to the same stuff. All right, Siege. I don't know. I feel like that kind of goes. I think that's going MP only. Like, again, one of those ones that got really buffed in one vision, but Siege allows you to ignore Rampart Aura. Thing is, there's a lot of other ways to also do that. You've got a lot of flying abilities. You've got ice magic with just being able to give somebody a battering ram, which is just Siege, but you don't have to waste a skill slot on it. So yeah, it's pretty much a multiplayer only kind of thing in terms of overall usefulness. I don't see much of a reason that you'd be running Siege in most cases. Also, hilariously, it should be something like Assault, not Siege, because you should be waiting outside of it. But whatever. Alright, next up, probably arguably the most busted skill in the game, Field Elk. One of the first ones they introduce, and one of the most busted because, yeah, complete full heals, which no magic thing can do. Gigantic AoE nukes that take wizards several side quests and an entire game's worth of build-up to be able to use effectively. Meanwhile, you know, some random dude can just go ahead and chuck that onto a lobber and go nuke an entire area across the map. It's, I forget if you can even load orbs into a lobber. I think like a lobber +2 can still use orbs. It doesn't matter. They have a good range on them anyway. I mean, the vanilla solo relied on so many divine orbs, it's not even funny. But funnily enough, they also scale with elemental affinity. So, like, for example, the map's elemental affinity. I'm forgetting the exact terminology right now because it's really early in the morning, but yeah, it can get pretty insane. So you can just always swap out for a different kind of orb if something else becomes more powerful. The divine ones have exorcism built in because they're basically Heaven Judge 2, but in your pocket. So easily probably the most busted thing in the game. I would move it up here if it wouldn't require moving stuff around. So yeah, where they are in the list is just where they came up on the list. This isn't like ranked for each category, just so we're clear. All right, max TP plus. We're gonna go ahead and put that over here. It's decent. I wouldn't say it's universal. Like it is very solid. It isn't something that's going to be completely broken over here, because for vanilla, generally speaking, the accuracy multi-hit moves are going to be far more powerful than the TP scaling moves. That's definitely moving its way up once we do the OV tier list for this. But it's very solid for basically for any unit that needs a bit more punch out of those finishers. Like two-handed swords and that kind of thing really benefit a lot from TP+. So it is very useful. It's just not as many things get a benefit out of it. Mostly fists and two-handers in my book are kind of the big ones that stick out. Actually, there is one other exception, which was Cudgels. Since for whatever reason, I think it was Cudgels that also scaled TP off of their multi-hit move. I could be mistaken on that one, but either way, pretty solid move overall. Can't really go terribly wrong with it. Alright, next up we have our next pretty much completely useless move, which is Treasure Hunt. Now, this move, all it really does, you're wasting one of your 10 slots on being able to increase your drop table when picking stuff up off the ground. Now, sure, if you're just running into Farampa and getting into fights and whatever else, and you're just randomly picking stuff up, sure. But when you're looking at the drop tables, it's actually funny that they actually dedicate a page in the official guide to how the drop tables actually work. And despite the fact that they never even bothered to explain the attack system, but moving on. But yeah, it's so insignificant, it's not even funny. Basically, it increases your the quality of the items that you find, but we're talking like you would have found a bronze bar, and now you found a steel bar. It's like, it's useful, sure, in some very ultra niche situations, but like it's like utility, but more useless, because you want to know something funny? Potentially, it can do absolutely nothing. Because if your luck is maxed out that day, you will be reaching those same tables. Yeah, there is like a above your luck kind of situation where, like if you have maxed out luck and treasure hunt, you can actually go above the potential threshold for where your drops can be, and then you get some slightly better ones. There's nothing in there that's super unique. Like, it isn't Knight of Lotus where suddenly you'll be getting end game weapons in the early game by having the treasure ability. So yeah, it's not really super worth it. For anyone unfamiliar with Knight of Lotus, for whatever reason, basically the deal was if you had your luck maxed out and you also had Embodiment of Desires, which again was that game's version of Treasure Hunt, you could potentially wind up with, like, imagine if you could get all the Damask tier items in Chapter 1, just picking them up off the ground. That's basically what it did in that one. It was far better in terms of overall usefulness, so there we go. Alright, next up we got Tactician. Now you might say, wait a minute, that's universal or superior, right? Not quite, because this doesn't work as it's often depicted. So a lot of times it's assumed that Tactician's just going to give you infinite TP, and it's just going to keep going up and up and up. It doesn't even increase the amount of TP that you get from getting hit. Most of your TP will still be from throwing out hits and getting hits. More or less what it breaks down to, TP1 is about 10 extra TP per round, sorry, not TP1. TAC1 is about 10 extra points per round, TAC2 is about 20 extra points per round. Can it be decisive? Yes, it's decent, but realistically you don't actually want to run it all the time. It gets a little bit overvalued, so we'll just go ahead and put that over there. Next up we have Reflect Damage. I don't even know if it fits under niche. I feel like it almost like it should be utility. Actually, I think we might even just put it under MP only, because the rules are just completely different there. So, Reflect Damage, despite for whatever reason occasionally being considered broken, it sucks. It's 10 or 20% damage reflection. In one vision, you can get that up to 40% if you stack the skills and the items that do reflect. But you're usually, again, you're taking 5 times as much damage as they are doing, as you're doing to them. There's almost no classes that actually gain a benefit of having Reflect, as opposed to just like resisting that damage and doing more, more some other way. It's completely not even worth a slot in my book unless you're doing multiplayer and you have a unit that's not doing anything else. They might as well have Reflect damage on them. But generally speaking, yeah, no, it's too niche to even be in the niche category in my book. Alright, next is Absorb MP. I'm putting that under useless. Like, if there's any class that can absorb MP, realistically, they have the ability to boost the MP that they have through other means. Most of the casters, or decent casters, get Meditate. That would already be better. You have the passive 3 MP boosting skills. Those are, those are their own thing. Absorb MP, like, what's that really going to do for you? Best case scenario, you're hit by a tier 4, like just big old AoE thing. You're hit by complete accident, and then what? You've already taken a bunch of damage. You maybe got some MP out of it. Like, we're talking maximum, you're maybe getting 30 MP. Basically, Meditate can do that for free, more or less, every round, or your MP passives can give you like 20, 25-ish. If you stack them all up, yeah, you'll get about that much, just kind of passively. It's completely useless. There's just never a reason to. Iron Maiden, that's gonna... Alright, and back. Random interruption. Alright, Iron Maiden's going under niche. So, it's Wither plus Poison. So it basically reduces max health by about 20%, and then it poisons on top. So it can be a, kind of solid move. Realistically, like, Dark Priest isn't that great anyway, but it's kind of a cool move. I like poison moves, personally. The fact that it gives Wither also means that they can't really heal it off as well. If it was in Venom and Wither, that'd be a lot stronger, but, it's okay. It does the job decently. It's kind of a cool move. It has a cool animation to it. It's very niche, but she's a spellcaster. She's going to have some spare slots available. Why not, Alright, Feather Step should be universal for any units that fly. So it says it gets rid of Leaden Bind and all that. Best way to think about it, and sorry if you hear the dogs barking in the background again, best way to think about it is just it makes your unit always able to fly. Like, most flyers will have some spare TP available because many of them don't really rely on finishers as much. Even the monster units will more than likely take a hit or give a hit before, before they're going to get re-leadened or anything like that. If you weren't aware for some reason, Bind isn't the only thing that stops you from moving. Leaden prevents you from flying. So this gets rid of both of those. So, it just keeps them in the air. If you have a unit that can use this and has run into that issue, just always keep Feather Step on them. It's pretty solid. Next up is going in the useless category. That's gonna be First Aid. I mean, it's Lord only. It's like a little one-tile heal thing. It's basically the same thing that you get in FFTA or A2. Bizarrely enough, despite working very similarly, it's not as useful as the one you get in Fell Seal, where it's just a little minor heal, but it's a skill. Why? Just use items. Yeah, Field Out. There's no reason you should ever use First Aid over Field Out. Just no. Next up is Glare. We're gonna say that's pretty much universal for the units that get it. They look at them and they get paralyzed. Great. Basically, I forget between. I think it's just stun in vanilla. It either might be stun or fear. It doesn't matter. Both cases, they're always going to have it. It's always handy. Why not? Next up for utility is Steel. Like, you'd kind of expect this. It is, by definition, absolutely a utility skill. it's oftentimes considered useless. It's not completely useless. There are some situations where it can be handy. There's actually quite a few decent craftables that you get later on. So, potentially instead of having to worry about... Okay, let me explain one thing. Yes, most of the time, a steel item isn't really going to be massively influential at that moment. But all those crafting materials can be really handy, especially in challenge runs, and they also will potentially save you a lot of time. Early on, like rank 1s and that kind of thing, you get bronze bars all the time. Saves you the time for making those. By rank 2, you're getting iron and steel. By the time you're getting into rank 3 and 4, which is where you really want to get it going, you'll be getting stuff like Balder. By the time, if you have rank 3 or 4, you can go get Reaver rings, which, by the way, it turns out those are not unique. I thought they were unique, but yeah, apparently you can just keep going back and getting more. Not only do you get stop proof, but that basically will rank it up by 2 ranks, meaning that now you can suddenly get things like Woots just from random units. So it can save you a lot of time and money. It's just that, yeah, it doesn't seem amazing at first. And it's not amazing, it's just really handy. I like keeping one unit with steel and just having them randomly yoink stuff. Why not? Probably my favorite one is just running heavy crossbow with, a heavy crossbow on a rogue, and just, they steal, they shoot. They steal, they shoot. They do their job well. Alright, next is sneak attack. It's going under decent. Just basically you ignore some defense if attacking from the back. It's solid. Why not? Next is check. I'd say that's pretty universal. It's cheap enough that you can spam it. It only starts off at 30% chance to hit, but it doesn't matter because it's an AoE. They're going to be in the front line anyway. They've got nothing better to do. Why not? Next is Bloody Gag. It's going under niche. Just like Iron Maiden, except a bit worse. Bloody Gag is silence, and I forget what the other effect is. It's silence plus something else. It's really the silence that matters. So it's just an off button for wizards. If for whatever reason you have your wizard next to their wizards, then there you go, you have it. That's just not really a situation that comes up that often. So, yay, I guess. Alright, next is Empower Golem. We're going to put that under multiplayer only. Golems are really slow. They're not really fun to run in the vanilla game. They're really, really strong, potentially. But for multiplayer, you can put it on there, you get Empower Golem, and suddenly one Raven Eye is going to wipe out multiple units at once. If you're running golems, sure, but realistically, most of the time you're using them for tanking damage, and if they get a Raven Eye, great. You usually will not be risking having your warlocks next to your golems, though, so it ends up falling into the multiplayer category in my book. Alright, next up is Meditate, one of the best. Basically, it can outclass the MP recovery of pretty much every other thing aside from Field Alchemy. So yes, ultimately Field Alch 4 will be better than Meditate. Actually, maybe we should put it under Universal rather than Superior. Just because, yeah, it does get completely outclassed by Field Alchemy, but still, it's free, it's there. It's something that you have pretty much all game. Lament of the Dead. So, Lament of the Dead is going in the superior category because Fear is by far the best debuff in the game. If you didn't know, it moves defensive threshold up and down, as well as attack and all that kind of difference. The exact amount I don't believe is known, but it does feel like about 20% of defense is just gone, meaning that in cases where you barely could get past armor, suddenly you get all your bonuses. In cases where you weren't getting past armor, suddenly you might be able to, or in cases where you were already getting past armor, it will improve it slightly. It completely wrecks the unit offensively and defensively. And it's a set chance move, meaning that while it starts off at 30%, you can spam it constantly. You can even get a two-hander that'll boost the odds. And you can eventually get that up beyond 80%. It has a huge AoE, so fantastic. Definitely going over there. Rapier Glance. We're going to go ahead and once again put under Universal, because it's just... If you're running them, odds are, you don't really have a whole lot else for them to do. They might as well get their free cripple move. Okie doke. Next we got Resonance. Okay. I'm actually going to put this one under Utility. Mostly because it has a far more useful utility option than it does actually being useful in a fight. Most of the time, you'll see dragons spamming Resonance over and over and over, and you might say that it's doing nothing for them. In fact, the funny part is they can't even buff themselves using it, but they are increasing their maximum damage every time they use it. That's because of the way that elements work on maps, where every time that a certain ability is used, based off like a whole chart of different numbers, more or less, it will kind of move the bar towards that element, increasing its potential maximum damage. Dragons actually can get quite a bit of damage going that way. And again, it's just kind of annoying to see them spam it over and over and over and thinking this is effectively doing nothing because they have no weapons, so they can't actually buff it. So it increases maximum damage, that's fine. I feel like its best utility is the fact that if you're using instills of any kind on a unit, they can actually train that skill. So, for example, if you put instill air or resonate air, or not resonate air, I think it's like aerial resonance or something like that. And essentially they're swinging that around. It is boosting their air augment every time that they're using it. So it's nice as a utility move. It's a little bit meh as a actual boosting move. Like, instills are an extra 25% damage, but I feel like their actual utility potential matters a lot more than their potential extra damage potential, because all the characters that get resonance probably wouldn't be by your front line anyway. Yeah, dragons can get it, but again, same thing as before. I just don't feel like they'd be next to those particular units. I personally like having them either directly in the front behind the guys that would actually get some benefit off the resonance, or have them going around the sides. Mostly because resonance will show up a couple turns into the fight, not immediately. Alright, next is Recruit. Superior. So, yeah, being able to finish off a unit with a skill that potentially can have up to a 70% chance to succeed, plus you're probably already running Anatomy, meaning that it's just amazing. It is just awesome overall. It can finish off a unit, it can give you free stuff, it can do everything. It's, again, one of the best skills in the game. We're talking basic Recruit. If we're talking, like, okay, Subdue, Tame, Coax, whatever, they're going under Niche. Because, like, realistically, the odds of that unit being next to the one that they have to handle, not super high. So we're going to put everything else as not Recruit on the list, but you get the general idea. Usually it's because you're looking for one particular type of unit. Master Undead kind of should be its own thing, but it, again, same thing, just kind of falls under Niche there. Alright, next is Gorgon Key. Useless. This unlocks Gorgon Lock. Yeah, why is your Warlock next to the attacking Golem exactly? Alright, next is Preempt. Niche. Can be really strong with knockback, but there's so many things that can get around Preempt that it's kind of too risky to use. Animate Dead. Superior. Actually, you know what? We're going to put that under multiplayer, actually. This is probably, bar none, the strongest multiplayer move, because running zombies in multiplayer tends to get them pretty deleted, because the AI is not good at keeping their units alive, but Necromancers with, let's say, Air Magic and Animate Dead are absolutely fantastic for keeping the team going. Funnily enough, though, despite all of that, the current best team does not have a single zombie on it. Anyway, very strong move. Actually, I forgot. You know, I don't think I ever made a video on the upgraded version of Motor Cobra. I should do that at some point. I just need a spare 4 hours to let them actually get through a fight, because oh my god, that team is boring. Okay. Next is Mighty Strike. This is the Swordmaster version. We're gonna go niche. Okay, so yeah, Mighty Strike is the Swordmaster version. It increases attack value by 25%. So this combined with the, not the Ogre's Bane, but, what is it, the Sweet Blade? Potentially highest attack value in the game, but it doesn't matter. It's like, it's a nice little extra bit of kind of penetration for them, but it's just not as good as, pretty much any other 100% move. Plus, they don't really have too many good secondaries. Now that I think about it, do 2 HKs even have any secondaries on their weapon? I don't believe so. Again, very kind of sucky weapons. Very kind of niche there. It's nice because you want them to hit a little harder, but you know, kind of shitty, to be honest. All right, next is Evade. Going under Superior, any unit that can use Evade basically just gets free damage avoidance entirely. Evanescence, basically self-destruct, but they don't always have to get knocked out. I heard somebody mention before that you can actually use, Decoy to avoid the damage from Evanescence, and use it for free. So, I would still say it's under niche, but it's just kind of neat that it's there. I actually completely forgot to test whether you could do that. I need to remember to do it later. Alright, next is Engulf. It's decent. It's extra damage, or not extra damage, it's extra range. So, like, let's say combining it with something like water lets you snipe poison AoEs across the map. It's pretty handy, especially for challenge runs. Very nice to have, you know, when it's there. It can easily be replaced by something else, because you don't really want to rely on something like that, but it's pretty good. Next is Princess's Whim. Useless. Now, on paper, it should be amazing. It gets rid of any debuff. Well, there's a chance to roll a chance to get rid of any debuff. Starts off at 30%. She almost always has a quip to say about it. Actually, it falls under meme category. So we're going to go ahead and move that over to meme there. Hang on, wait, what? Okay, apparently that one just suddenly decided... Ah, jeez. Yeah, we're going to undo that. Don't know why it decided to move the color along with it, but that's whatever. So it's going under meme category because it has a potential useful use. If you rank it up, it's okay. But it's a one-tile range and also hilariously misses almost all the time. So there's that. Princess isn't really the fastest class in the game by far, and yeah, it's just funny that she's always just talking herself up and then just misses. That's why it's going under meme category there. Next we got Guardian Force. It's really good. It's really good. We're just going to put her decent, though. It does the job well enough. It probably usually won't be enough to change a fight on its own, but it can let a unit essentially have a safe bubble to get to where they need to go. Speaking of, there's one that I know isn't on the list, which is Risk Management, which is going to go under Superior. Basically, it works like Guardian Force, but it's focused on the unit being protected and forces everybody around them to protect them, instead of forcing a sort of protective bubble. Meaning that a Berserker, which is more than likely what you'd use this for anyway, who wanted to get a big hit in, can essentially just turn that on and run next to whatever they want protecting them. So it's a lot more easy to use. It's just nice that it's there. Alright, next is Course Correction. It's decent. Not really any secondary effects on Fusels. I mean, it's a gun, what do you want? But it's still a 100% move, 100% chance to hit. It's fine. potentially handy there. Not as good as... Actually, wait a minute. Course correction... No. I'm mixing them up a little bit. I'm mixing up sharpshoot and course correction. It still doesn't matter. So course correction is the better of the two of them. It ignores all terrain in the way for the most part. Interestingly enough, it does not actually go through obstacles. So, for example, you can shoot through that entire house, but not the clay jar on the other side. So, yeah, it can hit obstacles still. It's a little unclear on what it will or will not hit. Actually, combining this with trajectory is pretty much the way to go. That's why it's going under decent. It's still a 100% chance to hit. It's better than sharpshoot. I mean, it still has a chance to crit, but it also completely avoids the main issue of using a Fusel there, so pretty much should always have it. Actually, we're going to go ahead and move it to Universal. I'm trying to avoid using Universal as much as possible because we're just straight up running out of space at this point, and there's still a long way to go. So, it is how it is. Alright. Next is Golem's Bane. Actually useless. Because it does not actually... Like, it gives you a damage boost against golems, but it doesn't actually ignore their defense that much. It almost never will do that much, if any, extra damage, so we're putting that under useless. Conserve MP, it's probably a utility move. Like, it's really strong. It allows for spamming summons off of Rune Fencers. I would consider it utility, though. There's other ways that you could do that and potentially do it faster. HP Infusion, gonna go under decent. Actually, I'm mixing up Conserve MP and MP Infusion. Conserve MP is the one that's cast for free. It's still utility, pretty much. I mean, it's entirely depending on its situation. But yeah, it definitely feels utility to me. HP Infusion is going under decent, but the thing to consider, it's not just free health. It's also one of the biggest... despite the fact that it says that it's not a very time-consuming skill, it makes you really slow for some reason. I don't know why, but that's just kind of over there. Salvation... You really might as well just have Meditate. Salvation is switching around your MP between multiple units that a Lich can do. It either spreads out their MP or it takes in MP. Realistically, it's just the taking in MP that you want to use. It's handy, for example, if they've got Knights around, so they can take their currently useless MP and make it theirs. Just get a full charge off that. Yeah, it's okay. It's just kind of niche there. Next up, Sanctuary Shadow is going under useless. Now, yes, technically, there's certain cases where you can block off ghosts and things. Thing is, Sanctuary Shadow never works when you want it to work. So if a unit is already standing on the tile where there's a Sanctuary thing, it will actually do absolutely nothing to them. If you put down a Shadow, they can still warp around it for whatever reason. It's funny because Rampart doesn't work that way. And additionally, like, just zombies always manage to find a way around Sanctuary Shadow. Like, when I was doing solo, I got to test it extensively, and even against very kind of low-complexity undead units, it was still next to useless. Like, it could direct them around, but, for example, you'd want to stop ghosts. It doesn't. You'd want it to stop skeletons. It kind of does until it doesn't. Like, it's just unreliable, is the thing. Alright, next up we got Shadow Break. We'll put it here, too. Or, I guess, MP only. Basically dispels shadows, as you'd expect from the name. Pretty niche, but ultimately you're really only going to be using it in multiplayer. It almost never comes up. There's a couple boss Terror Knights that have it, but it pretty much never will come up, is the thing. Okay. Next up, we have Mind's Eye going under niche. Basically allows avoiding all melee attacks, which is nice, except then they end up getting hit by Petrify or something, which completely overwrites the effect. It's, like, it's easy to avoid. A lot of times the AI will seem to realize that they can still hit them with debuffs. So if you can make a build where, for example, you've got Mind's Eye and you've also got like some kind of magic shield up, then yeah, it could work a bit better. I just feel like there's better uses of that skill slot. Next is Speedstar. I feel like it's not necessarily worth a slot on its own, but it can be handy for speeding up rogues. It doesn't actually help that much. If it's a free move, it's nice a little speed up, but in a lot of cases, like the time that it takes to use Speedstar basically means you're losing your first turn of effect from it anyway. So potentially there might be better ways to do it. Like if you've got Reaver rings and things like that, setting up with a haste before going in would generally be better. Usually you don't want to be using Speedstar in the middle of a fight. It's not necessarily going to be that decisive on its own. So that's why it's going under decent. Like, it can potentially have a use. It's not awful. It's just that there's better ways to do that particular thing. Okay, next is Holy Water. Superior. You should just always be running that on Casual. I believe all her skills can use Holy Water, or all of her classes can use Holy Water, so just do that. Mother's Mercy is niche. It's the one that gets rid of all debuffs, but only for your cleric. It's a nice little way to make them a bit more reliable, but it's also fairly expensive to use, and also constantly gets mixed up with Mother's Blessing. So, yeah, that's just going to go over there. Alright. So, Mother's Blessing pretty much should always have it on your clerics, so that's going to go there. Sharpshoot is whatever. I mean, if you really need a maxed out crit as opposed to actually avoiding things, sure, but I feel like it's a way more niche use. Double Impact, which is, yeah, Double Impact is just a double hit move. Yeah, putting that under Superior. Here's why. So, but I'm going to put Double Shot over here. Here's my reasoning on this. So, melee characters are more likely to be backed up against a wall, meaning that you can get those double hits off. It's essentially a double attack without having to sacrifice your shield slot. It's fairly cheap to use, and yeah, both hits have the ability to crit. So, for example, if you've got luck plus a like heavy hammer or something like that, they can do a whole lot. Double shot, on the other hand, for whatever reason, dex builds tend to have higher luck, meaning that there's a pretty solid chance that second shot is going to miss entirely. Plus, they kind of lose out on the fact that Double Shot takes quite a while to use. Double Impact does as well, but they're more likely to have a chance to counter and tank and essentially do all their useful stuff while they're up front. So that's nice there. Next is Fearful Impact. Definitely going also into Superior. Guaranteed secondary effects, guaranteed fear, guaranteed hit. It's a lot of nice guarantees on there. Dash, I'm going to put as utility. It just gets somebody over there faster. Dragon Slayer is decent. Actually, I would say Dragon Slayer is probably superior. More or less lets you one-shot dragons. Not to mention the reason that it's actually going into superior is the fact that you can get it on almost any class in the game by using the Dragon Slayer set. So if you put 3 pieces of any of the dragon items, you can just have Dragon Slayer on anybody, which is very handy. You don't always have to have a Dragoon, and basically around the time where there's more dragons showing up is when the Dragon Slayer set is available. Next is Dragon's Eye. They should always be running that. Makes them hit with a 100% chance. Especially useful when doubling up with a boost move. Also, one quick second. Let me adjust the text size real quick. Alright, there we go. Got a little bit more space on the list. This will continue to break down as time goes on. Alright, next is Dragon Scale. putting that under multiplayer only, it's 90% damage reduction and also reflects damage. Very strong, but realistically, your tank... Well, dragons as a tank will not be targeted that often. So unless they have a Dragoon and you have Dragon Scale to essentially counter the Dragoon, it's a lot of predicts for something that the AI is pretty dumb about using, so... Kind of niche, but potentially very handy in multiplayer, where you can potentially set up a situation where you can abuse that. Which, alright, moving on. Dragon's Wound, useless. Just counters Dragon Scale, way too niche to ever really be worth using. Dragon's Bane, niche. Because, realistically, you're, like, it's a lot easier to just get Dragon Slayer on somebody. Dragon's Bane increases your damage against dragons, but it doesn't necessarily help as much. Like, I've seen it listed as being Dragon Slayer, but for everybody, but no, it just boosts damage against them. It doesn't do the same thing Dragon Slayer does, which is completely ignore their armor. Tremendous Shot is superior. 100% hit chance, 100% secondary chance. So, for example, endgame bows can shackle or bind or any of that on shot, which is pretty insane, plus it's pretty cheap to use. Oftentimes you're better off using this than a finisher. Berserk is decent. Takes your melee, makes it AoE. Dandy! Very handy on a crit build, because they can knock stuff off walls pretty often. Back attack is pretty niche. Makes an attack act as if it was from the back. Pretty obvious there. Next is, Barricade. Going under niche as well. Actually, I feel like it should go under decent. This one gets looked down upon sometimes, but here's the thing. Barricade is not just a shittier version of Shadow. Basically, the thing is, for like Rampart Shadow or Sanctuary Shadow or any of those, you have to dedicate multiple slots to have that ability. Barricade and Jack-O-Lantern, which we can consider Jack-O-Lantern the same thing as Barricade for all intents and purposes. They more or less cost the same, they do the same thing. But the AI does not know how to target them, for one thing. But for another... they're quick to use, they only take one skill slot to use, and you can use them to create choke points, which can be very, very handy. They do take a little while to set up, but they're more or less a sort of way of saying, okay, I don't want anybody coming from over here all of a sudden in this situation. They're more reactionary than they are a setup move, so that kind of has to be understood going into it. Alright, next we got Beast Slayer. That can go over there. It's kind of niche, just because, well, beasts you can usually fight normally. You don't necessarily need a Slayer move for them. Beast Bane is better, because they do... Beast Banner, nice. Beast Bane, because I was trying to say better, and was trying to say Beast Bane, and somehow it just came out all dyslexic-like. Basically, you are already reasonably getting past their defenses, so Beast Bane ends up doing a better job than Beast Slayer. Vigorous attack is niche but solid. Gives everybody a 100% chance to melee hit and 100% chance of secondary, so potentially handy for mass dumping of secondary effects, but potentially better ways to go about it. It's mostly just the fact that it has to be AoE around your front soldier guy. But it's niche but solid. I like to run it, but I wouldn't really recommend it, so to speak. Next is Phalanx, which can potentially be one of the most busted moves in the game, because if you send out a Naked Knight and give them Phalanx, the AI does not know how to calculate Phalanx on purpose, so they will essentially keep targeting them thinking, man, I'm going to get all this meaty damage, and then they do like 5. So, you know, that's nice there. Next is Booby Trap. That's going under meme. Interestingly enough, you can actually scale up your damage using elemental affinities, but yeah, they're just way too niche to really be handy in most situations. They're kind of just an extra thing to play with. They're not something you're really going to plan a strategy around.
Next up is Steel Stance, which is under Superior. It's broken. It is completely broken. It's functionally, I want to be invisible for a turn. Alright, we are now 4 recording sessions into a game that supposedly has no interesting skills. Let's get on it here. Okay, so where were we here? Looks like Consecrate Dead. That almost feels like it should be utility. Like, it does the job great. It just doesn't come out that... Okay, we're going to put Consecrate under MP only. Logic behind that being that, well, if you need to mass consecrate units, either something's going terribly wrong already, or you know, you're in a multiplayer fight and somebody's brought a lot of zombies. So I'm going to put that here. Same thing for Condemn. Actually, no. Condemn is going under completely useless. So Condemn basically just means that you don't get to use revives. This does not apply to undead units. So, for example, if undeads are consecrated, well, then they can be revived. They're just stuck in place. Now, if you're talking about Condemn, though, it prevents basic revives, which the AI is incapable of doing. So, unless you're doing non-AI against an AI team in a challenge match, that's the only one situation where Condemn would actually matter. It's completely worthless. It's mostly there. I think they only meant it to be a boss move, because that's the only time it can actually do anything to you. Realistically, in a multiplayer fight, what are you doing, you know, running that anyway? Okay, Sanguine Assault, Superior. So, Sanguine is I believe it's like plus 50% strength bonus. Which means that it also boosts defense because it's just boosting strength. But yeah, it's potentially absolutely nuts in terms of damage. It potentially, despite being a 50% bonus, oftentimes can throw you past many thresholds, meaning it absolutely crushes in most situations. So probably the best, you know, I need to do one big whack with my basic attack kind of move there. Mighty Impact is that's going to be the soldier version. That's going to be under Universal. Largely because Double Impact is almost the same cost. It doesn't come that much later. Yeah, Mighty Impact is reliable. It's good. It's just, like, if you need a guaranteed shot, a ranged unit is more likely to be able to target the target that you need. Mighty Impact is kind of situational. I feel like Knockback does the job better, because it's usually more than Knockback that matters there. Alright, so moving on to Apostate. That's just, I don't feel like getting hit by magic today. That's going to go under Decent. Oop, wrong one. Accidentally hit caps, apparently. So it's going under Decent because there really aren't too many big threatening magic moves that are going to hit you. It can get rid of a debuff, like it can block off a debuff, but it's pretty expensive for just blocking something you could probably have avoided some other way. It's actually interesting because they actually fixed the idea behind this skill in Felseal, wherein you have you have a multitude of different debuffs that basically do the same thing. So, for example, if something is going to hit you with a debuff, you have a barrier up. If somebody's going to hit you with with the magic thing, you can have a mirage up. If you want somebody to not be able to heal themselves, then you would hit them with weaken. But either way, that's a different game. It's just, yeah, this skill tries to do too many things at one time, and it potentially can screw you over. So it's going under Decent for actually, it's going under Niche. Screw it. It's very oddly specific, and potentially can screw you. So yeah, definitely Niche. Lucky Star goes under Meme. It just boosts everybody's luck. It's kind of whatever. Realistically, those few points of luck, they're not going to make a huge difference. I mean, if you keep spamming it over the course of a fight, especially in the end game, it can potentially lead to some pretty funny results. Again, not really something you want to build a strategy around. Rampart Shadow. Pretty busted. You do have to
put multiple skills into being able to use it, but it's still very, very good. It does something very unique. It can stop a large number of units from going to different spots. And on top of just outright stopping them from going on certain tiles, it can slow them down in other places. It also inexplicably blocks teleports. Sure, why not? Risk management. Oh, I thought I didn't have risk management on here. Well, we already ranked it. It's over here. Also, by the way, totally forgot earlier. I keep making more space when you can just do this. Whoops. Anyway. What else we got? Reflection. That's going under multiplayer only. When the hell do you ever need to reflect magic in this game? Requiem, big ol' AoE move that I believe can also get rid of undead. That's going under decent. Mostly because you need a unique class that's a real pain in the neck to be able to even use it. Stun Breath, 1 and 2. That's going under universal. I'm just putting all breath attacks on universal because there's really no reason that you shouldn't have at least one. And it's not even a like start of the game, end of the game thing. It's just, it depends on what the unit needs to do. If you need a heavy hitter, you go for the breath 2. If you need them spamming their debuff, you go for the breath 1. Because breath 1 is a lot easier to get, and breath 2 is, well, I mean, it's a big bomb, essentially, that they launch. But it takes a decent bit to get there. Alright, Day of Reckoning. I believe that's the massive AoE anti-undead move. Just pretty much universally handy in multiplayer. A bit too niche, just kind of in the regular game. Because again, usually you just fight undead some other way and use exorcism on them just to save yourself some time. Taillash. I'm just going to put monster skills. Because Taillash, same thing. There's just no reason not to use it. It's basically like the breath, but you can target it diagonally. Same thing goes for Numbing Hook, Blood Siphon. It's just, if you have a monster unit, you're already going to have them there, so what's the point? Alright. So, there's like 15, I don't know, depending on how you want to count it, like 15 to 20 different versions of like Stirring Kiss and all these other ones. So, we're going to put this under Gremlin moves. Sorry, we're just going to make them sprite moves. Most of them are decent. Now, the problem with actually ranking them on a thing like this is because a lot of them have 2 or 3 different versions, which do different things depending on who the hell is using it. The Gremlins have a version, the Fairies have a version, Azelston has a version. So they're anything from, like, give somebody poison and shackle or whatever else, to, like, oh, it just withers them, to it slows them down, and what was the other one? There's a whole bunch of different versions. Point being, most of them are just decent. They just fall under decent. They're a nice little distraction move and whatever else. There is one, and only one, that matters in their entire pile that is head and shoulders above the rest, and that is Virtuous Dance. Reason I say this, and bear in mind, I am aware that one of the Kiss moves is essentially an RT delay, which is very annoying. That RT delay, it's not something that you can really plan around yourself very often. You probably don't want to have a Gremlin in the front lines. It's really only handy when the AI is using it against you in Palace of the Dead on a very heavy unit and gets them stun locked. That is its own thing. I don't feel like something that only the AI can use, just like Condemn, is very particularly, handy on a skill list. Virtuous Dance, on the other hand, is AoE, Charm, and Bewitch and all that kind of nonsense. It can completely change a fight on its own, right? Because Bewitch is a massive pain in the neck to get rid of. It might Charm, it might Bewitch. It just destroys an entire area. It is actually good enough to have a fairy in your front line there. Probably one of the scariest units in the game is if you set up a unit just for mind and agility, and then you have, you give them the Fire Crest and Virtuous Dance, and that's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Alright. Next up, alright, let's see. Heaven's Tear, Raven Eye, again, that just falls under monster skills. You should already have them on there anyway. They're strong in their own situation. They run up, they hit, they do big AoE. Heaven's Tear in particular sticks out for being a massive AoE crush, but, you know that already. It's still under Universal. They just should always have it. What else we got here? Sorry, I'm like trying to boil down 20 plus different breath moves and whatever else off this list, seeing if there's anything that's missed. Celestial Song. If this is what I think it is. So it's Celestial Song and some other one, both of which can go under the meme category. Angel Knights get two different songs, one of which deletes MP, the other one deletes zombie status, which is... It's way too niche to even be niche. If it was multiplayer, getting rid of MP won't necessarily disable a casting unit, because, they more than likely will get there in the middle of their turn, by which point they'll be able to just recover out of it anyway, while getting rid of zombie status is not something that the AI knows how to use, so, it's not even useful for multiplayer. That would have been hilarious if you can just turn an entire zombie team human, but anyway. It's falling firmly into the meme category of just being funny that it's even there. Alright. So, there's an entire suite of pumpkin abilities that only pumpkin heads get. They're again going into the meme category. I'm putting all of them into here, so it's an entire suite of just pumpkin stuff, basically. It's like Pumpkin Pie is an AoE heal based off current health. Pumpkin Bomb is an AoE explosion based off current health. Pumpkin Strike, I believe, is a holy scaling, just one-shot snipe. And then Crystal Pumpkin is an exorcism holy missile type deal. It's all really oddly specific and pretty good, but it's going under the meme category because you're basically dropping pumpkins on everybody for different reasons. So yeah, that's gonna go over there. Agonal Scream. That's again just going under monster skills. It's just something that should already be there. Coquettish Kiss, same thing. Pumpkin Lure. Yeah, Pumpkin Lure is weird because it's something that you actually just draw in, more or less. Reflection, Salvation, we already did those. Reflect Magic, shouldn't be necessary. Jack-o'-lantern, basically the same thing as Barricade. Huh, is that actually all of them? Well, that's all that I have for this list anyway. I know there's some that I missed. I guarantee there's ones that I missed. Let me try to think if there's any off the top of my head. But I think this more or less kind of covers it. Like, the superior stuff is just stuff that if you have the option, you're probably never going to take those off. They're going to make a huge difference on their own. There's only one AoE, there's only one action move exorcism on there in the form of Holy Water, just because it exercises, it saves you a turn more or less, as opposed to something like Consecrate, which basically just puts the problem off for another day. Again, Universal is just stuff that's pretty much never going off the list. It's going to be universally handy. Decent is pretty good, but, you can give or take. Niche is pretty unlikely to be used. Well, I say unlikely to be used, even though Double Attack is on there, just because I feel like one thing I didn't explain with Double Attack earlier is just how much you need to dedicate in order to keep that running. See, early on, like, let's say the optimal use case for let's say a Double Attack. Let's say you got your Ninja, you got your Dual Ghost Blade +1s, and, okay, you get your Water Augment, you get your 1HKs, you get your Double Attack, and you've dedicated 30% of your skill slots for basic attacks. If somebody has parry, it can disable one or both of them. You're giving up the ability to have any defensive item on there. You're giving up the ability to have something like a blow dart for additional, nonsense. And yeah, you're essentially if you double attack and you're blocked for whatever reason and can't put up Steel Stance, potentially it can lead to some problems there. Meanwhile, a single attack plus Steel Stance will give you decent attack, plus we'll be able to, well, granted, double attack twice as many attacks, but they won't be giving up their next turn.
More than likely, you'll be able to still put up Steel Stance, and worst case scenario, you give them a shield or something like that, and they might be able to survive stuff a little bit better. Even in multiplayer when I was testing it, even with maxed out vitality and everything else, it just was occasionally a lot more trouble than it was worth. It's just, yeah, it's kind of an edgelord skill to put on there. I just feel like I always have to explain ranking double attacks low in almost every list that I've ever done, because they almost always come with downsides that just get completely not considered in favor of, you know, look me have 2 sword. So I'm going to put that there. Not to mention, if you actually are making a multiplayer team for double attack, funny part is there's almost no like top-end weapons that match up elements, meaning you're either running 2 different weapon types or you're running 2 different element types, which, again, at that point you're dedicating 40% of your skills to basic attacks. There's just better stuff you can be doing. So, I think that does a pretty solid job of covering most of the skills here. The One Vision one's going to be next, and there's going to be a lot more to say on that one. But yeah, let me know what you think, and I guarantee there will be 101 different disagreements as this goes on. You guys have a good one, take care, and as always, have an awesome one.